Welcome to the Scaling Tech Podcast, where we help you manage your growing engineering team. Through expert interviews, we help you navigate the challenges of leading, hiring, growing, and nurturing your tech team to deliver the value your customers demand. Brought to you by agilityfeet.com, experts in staffing engineering teams in Latin America for clients globally.
I'm Aaron Syme, host of the Scaling Tech Podcast here in Bogotá, Colombia with Pablo Miller from Remoti. Pablo, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today about software development in Colombia. Let's start by just having you introduce yourself a little bit and also Remoti, please.
Amazing. So I'm originally from the UK, was born there, bred there, lived there most of my life, but my mom's from Armenia, Quindío, which is a coffee region. Growing up in the UK, very early stage, let's say in my headhunting career, I worked with fintechs just after 2008. Working with them, they started asking us about kind of, how do we internationalize? And in the UK, traditionally, companies would always go to Asia, go to India. Being half Colombian, I thought I need to go and check out what's happening there. This was almost 10 years ago, next year. And I saw that there's a massive paradigm change here, that there's an amazing workforce that we like to call the modern workforce. And Remoti is doing basically that. We want to connect global opportunity locally, and we work with corporate companies, listed businesses that want to reallocate workforces to Latin America. And what we do is we provide the infrastructure. So we help you find the people, we hire the people, we also then retain the people.
So it's more than recruiting. So tell me a little bit more about the offerings that you have.
Yeah, exactly. So we started off as a recruiting company, and then obviously it didn't work. So clients were like, "Why would we work with a Colombian recruitment company, guy called Pablo in Bogotá, and we're a UK business?" The reason why I did that was because I kind of saw the potential in hiring local recruiters here in Colombia. Not only for the salary arbitrage, but most importantly, we've never hired salespeople. We've actually just hired psychologists, trained them into recruiters, and that's been our secret sauce. So we were kind of a small company. We never really could actually kind of lift off. And then that was when the pandemic hit. Certain clients were like, "You guys are based in Colombia, and we're hiring. Everyone's remote already in the US or in Europe. Why don't you give us a taste for what the kind of local candidates are?" They then saw their high proficiency in English, their amazing technical capabilities, and also the kind of like cultural affiliation they had to the US. Colombians are, since age one, they're watching HBO. So that's when they were like, "Okay, can you find us the people? Then we can't set up a legal entity to hire them. So can you hire the people?" Then as you and I were discussing before this podcast, Colombia is very similar to the United States. One region is very different to the other region. They feel like different countries. How do we retain these folks? How do we build benefit packages so that it's catered for them? So ultimately, we like to say that we're the full talent cycle, that we find, hire, and retain your people.
The full talent cycle, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about several things you touched on there that I want to go back into in more depth. But let's start with what attracts those companies to Colombia. You touched on that some, but let's go in a little bit more about that. And are your clients primarily from the US, Europe, a mix?
Sure. So our holding business is in the UK. So obviously we can cater for European clients, and we do, but I would say 90% of our current clients are US companies. And the interesting part is that they're US listed businesses. And unfortunately, clients don't come to us when everything's going all rosy. So most of our clients are on the verge of being delisted. A lot of our clients now, they will already have, let's say, outsourced teams in Asia or in that time zone, and they want to bring it back closer to their time zone. So the first answer to you is, why do people look at Latin America? It's number one, time zone. I think we're 1 hour difference to New York, 3 hour difference to California. Secondly, it's that, people here are ultimately, if you provide good conditions, a good career development plan, Latinos are very, very loyal people. So if we look at kind of what's happened in the United States, the war on talent, graduates, moving every 1 or 2 years, the Gen Zs, the millennials, if you don't give them a promotion after day 2, they're going to leave, or a salary increase, or a vice president title. So really it's about kind of that retention piece here, that if clients do come here, people stay. Number 3, they come here because the technical skill set is very good. So outsourcing is not something that's just come up with all these sexy HR tech companies that have started the last 5 years. This has been around. I'm sure you've seen it for many years. But ultimately, the level of talent here. I think just in Bogotá alone, we have over 200,000, let's say, mid to senior devs at the moment. The government is very much focused now on building more graduates, and also convincing graduates to, let's say, not become lawyers, psychologists, more let's start looking at computer scientists. So let's say the talent pool is very good. And number 3, and I say this with a lot of caution about kind of salary arbitrage, is that we like to work with clients that don't think, okay, we're going to build a team in LATAM and this is a cheaper workforce, them and us, but it's more about, let's say, rebalancing workforce across borders. So for the senior folks, they should most certainly be paid something similar to what they're being, their colleagues in the US are. But let's say for that layer underneath, that is where there is salary arbitrage. That is where clients can save money and build a career development plan, so that the younger developers can see that as they grow up in that organization, they can ultimately achieve what we call the Colombian dream, which is ability to earn in US dollars, ability to have similar income to people in the US, but actually stay in Colombia, where the families are, where their own culture is. And socially speaking, that's fantastic, because you're building a new society here. So that's that. And then the other side is that I like to say that Colombia and South America, they're ready for business. We've had such a horrid history. We've really struggled, but we've reached a stage now that, let's say, this generation, it's kind of past them now. Colombia is a cool place. As cheesy as it sounds, the only risk is wanting to stay. So really that workforce, they're well-traveled. They've got friends from outside. They understand technology. They speak great English. They're ready to work for, ambitious businesses. So really what we're seeing here is that as US companies are now understanding the benefits of Latin America, they are turning off teams in Asia. They are turning off teams in that time zone. And they're looking to build it closer to home.
Well, that's great. You identified a lot of great benefits there of working with teams in Colombia, and definitely resonates with our experience as well. In our work, I think it's interesting to know, and I like the way you describe the salary arbitrage, right? That across a portfolio of your team, the portfolio of your organization, there are opportunities for cost savings, but your primary drivers in coming here to Colombia or LATAM in general should not be making sure that for each individual role, there's X percentage savings over US salary. You've got to look at talent availability, because we do have a talent shortage in the US, and then just complexity of bringing that talent on board, and retention, as you talked about. So I think those are all really important things to consider, as well as technical skills.
Another important point here as well, it's we have a great study with a client of ours called Sezzle. They're a Minnesota-based buy now, pay later company. They were 500 people. They had scaled down to 200 people. Market cap went from 30 million to now recently it's about 1.2 billion last week. They've now scaled up to 350 people. And one of the reasons of that turnaround was obviously building a team in LATAM, cost savings, but most importantly was getting the buy-in of their local engineers in Minnesota, in New York. They're also kind of a remote business, but they actually have to buy in and working with the Latin engineers. Mm-hmm. And obviously they want to hire locally, but then it was like the company convinced them to hire outside. So it was actually, really beautiful to watch, actually, Americans feeling comfortable working with Latinos, because that just shows that these Latinos, or Colombians in this case, they're respected by the senior US engineers, and that just shows the ability of technical skill, ability to communicate, and ability to work harmoniously with a US counterpart.
Yeah, no, I think, thank you for pointing that out. I think it's a great observation and very true. And in our experience in Latin America too, I mean, it's obviously, you think as a US company, you think first about, am I going to have the English skills that I need for communication on top of obviously the technical skills as well? But it's having a good dynamic between your teams in LATAM and in the US is more than just having good English skills, right? You need to have cultural affinity and similar working styles as well as similar working hours. And I think that's something that Latin America in general offers as well. It's less of a hierarchical culture than a lot of Asian cultures. And so you tend to have a little more free exchange of ideas between team members, which is something that in U.S. business culture we value a lot, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of U.S. colleagues always that's more kind of jokey. They go, yeah, you're going to be cautious of Latin America as a mañana mentality. But I do feel that if they, especially here in Remoti, we have a kind of like a little slogan, it's like, you've got to move fast. Like if you bring that culture from day one with your Latin colleagues, they get used to it. And they get used to that fast tempo. So let's say kind of that negativity base that we had before with Latin colleagues, it's just about setting the right culture, setting the right rules, and working at that tempo.
I agree, and I think also you have the I like also what you talked about with that client example of where their U.S. engineers were really buying into working with the team in Colombia, and that's another benefit of Colombia, I think, too, as compared to other further places away from the U.S. and Latin America, that you have that opportunity not only to work in the same time zones, but also to send people back and forth, have a chance to work together in person. I think we've had experiences of bringing our clients to various locations around Latin America, and it's always a great experience for them to see a little bit of the culture, do a little bit of tourism, have some fun, and in the process really get to know their coworkers better. And likewise in the other direction too, for the senior staff, and the team in Colombia to be able to visit the U.S. too is a nice benefit. Yeah. Maybe that's one of the things. Let's go back to the topic of retention with the talent in Colombia. Possibly being able to work directly with clients in the U.S. or traveling to the U.S. might be benefits. What other sorts of things should the U.S. company think about when they're working with a team? Even if they're not the ones formally employing them, they still care about retention, right? Because they're learning about their software, they're learning their systems, they're building that good rapport in the team. And so you don't want to see them leave quickly, right? So what should a U.S. company think about in terms of retention of their talent in Latin America?
A great question. I think number one, just to kind of emphasize what you said, it's critical. If you're able once a year to have a meetup in the US, it means a lot, right? Because Latinos, Colombians love to visit, and then it feels like they're actually working for an American company. Number two, I think the way payments are done. So you and I briefly discussed is that there's inflation is very high here. So the dollar also is fluctuating all the time against the peso. So if you're earning in dollars here or earning in pesos, there needs to be a way that you can safeguard that. So what companies need to do is have the ability to have, let's say, folks to be paid in US dollars, but then to be also paid in local currency. So they can, let's say, day-to-day expenditure, they have that in pesos, but if they're able to then have US dollars saved up for, for their retirement, etc., it's a key thing for retention here. So I guess, normally in the outsourcing world, it's like you either pay locally or you pay in dollars. Now it's a critical point where you're trying to attract and retain senior talent.
Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. And it's an opportunity for that software development talent in Latin America too, to be, maybe have be more of a part of the global economy, and that's attractive to them as well. You mentioned earlier education and the government in Colombia trying to encourage education around technology fields. Can you talk a little bit more about your experiences in the tech talent in Colombia and what their sort of education is like and how prepared they are for the workforce?
Yeah, no, great point. So here in Colombia, they have an amazing scheme that before you graduate, you actually have to go and work in a local company, and you have to be treated as a normal employee. So this means that a lot of these computer science grads, they're able to, have a year working either for a big corporate or software house, working with senior devs that can tell them kind of what good looks like. Number two, our previous president, Iván Duque, he set up what's called the orange economy, and that's digital first policy. So that means that several companies are given incentives to hire younger folks straight out of university, especially computer science graduates, And so that means that with those incentives, companies naturally will offer higher salaries, more benefit packages, and better career development plans. But ultimately, where the government is looking at, and the future is that with this kind of America First policy, not to get into politics, and obviously issues with Mexico, Colombia is the next natural choice of emerging markets where they can hire. So the government knows that, and they're purposely just making it extremely easy for US companies to either land here in Colombia, tax incentives, press incentives, relocation packages incentives, to set up shop here and hire local graduates.
And there are a tremendous number of large U.S. tech companies with offices both here in Bogotá as well as in Medellin. And that's, perhaps one of the things that makes Colombia unique for finding software development talent is that you have that affirmation of these large companies who are already here as well, and that speaks well of it. What else would you say kind of makes Colombia unique for software development, and what do you see as the kind of like what is the market like for software developers in Colombia right now?
It's a bit of a kind of depressing answer, but unfortunately, Colombia was in a bit of a tech bubble. So let's say before, the United States had all those issues with regional banks imploding. We had issues with, let's say, interest rates. There's a lot of VC money here. SoftBank had an $8 billion LATAM fund. Several of that was deployed in Colombia. So as we saw, a lot of companies receive funding. They grew their teams, but they weren't able to get a Series B or Series C. So what this means is for kind of well-established US firms that want to come here now and establish a serious business, a serious team, there is a large talent pool available of local Colombia talent, which is obviously great for you guys. So great for the ecosystem, bad for the entrepreneurial local startup scene. But most importantly, I think it's that, speaking to a partner in a top 4 consultancy, and he kind of worked with, let's say, Microsoft, General Electric in Mexico 25 years ago, convincing them to build teams in Mexico. And at that time, Mexico wasn't tried and tested, but the talent was very good. It just very raw still. It needed that, let's say, kind of higher layer of, let's say, management to come in and organize and to skill up. He says that that's what Colombia is right now, what was Mexico 20 years ago. That, there's already been great local case studies of tech unicorns. There's already been a lot of case studies of US companies coming here. Now it's time to speed up. However, we're not the first to the party, but we're not the last to the party. So there's still a lot of opportunity here to hire great talent. They understand the structure of working with foreign colleagues. They understand the structure of working in English. They understand the structure of working in that time zone. They understand the culture. It's something they know what to do. Now is the time.
Oh, that makes sense. And yeah, it's unfortunate to see a bubble in the startup industry in Colombia. Certainly we're familiar with that in the US as well. It happens, unfortunately. But the good thing that does come of that is development of the talent and opportunities to learn from those experiences.
Entrepreneurs are great people to hire.
Yes, definitely.
And also great, the people that have worked in those startups and see them blow up, they bring in valuable experience to the company they go to work for.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you compare Colombia to the rest of Latin America in terms of tech talent in general?
Yeah, so obviously if we look at Brazil, Brazil's, we like to call it kind of our wealthy neighbor. Brazil's 20 years advanced from Colombia. The technology scene there is more established. There's bigger companies, but then the war on talent is higher there, and retention is harder there. So obviously, let's say it's quicker to get into Brazil, but it's definitely more expensive. It's easier to identify candidates in Brazil, but can you retain them? So that's another thing that Colombia obviously is a more obvious choice. If we look at kind of Brazil, Argentina, again, not getting too political, but Milei he is turning it around. Inflation is coming down, a lot quicker. Having said that, is that there's already been many companies that have landed there. Buenos Aires it's been actually, let's say, on the crypto scene, one of the the cities has provided a lot of the software development for US crypto companies. And so again, the war on talent there, it's harder to entice them away because some of those guys are already on very, very large salaries. They've been with those companies for a long time. So I think Colombia obviously, has that differentiation. And number three is that in Colombia right now, given a lot of companies have closed down, there is a larger supply of that. And then in terms of just getting to the US, we're a lot closer.
Yeah, definitely. I can vouch for it. Much easier to fly to the U.S. or to Colombia from the U.S. than Brazil for sure. But yeah, I think you hit on some interesting points there, and I think this is always important to consider as you're, when you're expanding beyond the borders of the U.S. with your technical team. Is geographical diversity helps, right? For a variety of reasons, whether it's natural disaster, political changes, inflation, economic instability. These are problems faced around the world, and they're not, and we're not immune to them in the U.S. either, certainly. And so, having a workforce that's distributed is a big benefit and something valuable to consider in that. So, great. Well, let's talk as we close here. Ask a couple of other, little less technical topics, but. First, I want to ask and especially for someone like you, who've had an experience living in the UK and in Colombia, so you probably have a unique perspective on this. How has Colombia changed in your life?
For example, the first thing is it's just safety. Colombia is still Colombia. However, you can see from my office, the houses there for $4 million. There's flats, for several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the price of real estate here has obviously gone up because it just shows the kind of the type of people with certain incomes that live here. So with that, it means that you're not just you're not living in the Wild West, as a lot of people think we are. Number two, if you let's say that stage of your life, you've got children, the local schools here are very good. You're able to have your children to study IB, the international. I can't remember the name, but exactly. Yeah. And the teachers from the UK, they're from the US. So that means that if you're living here, your children, the quality of the education is as good as the US, and their ability to get into a good Ivy League school it's there as well. In terms of, quality of life, I've just come back from the coffee region. It took me half an hour to get there. The flight cost me $50. So for me, being brought up in the UK, the fact that I can go coffee picking on the weekend is just amazing. Also, you're an hour away from the Caribbean. That means that on the weekends you can, go and sit in Cartagena, eat amazing food. It's just naturally a culture-rich city, with everything that you can see there. And most importantly, Colombians are just very happy people. When you talk to people, they say good morning to you. They'll do whatever it takes to make you feel good. So the quality of life here is very good. And if you live in certain neighborhoods, it's extremely safe. Education is good. The gastronomy, the food here is amazing, and a lot cheaper than New York and Miami. So you're able to, let's say, I hate to coin the phrase, but it's extremely affordable to live an affluent lifestyle here.
No, that makes sense. And I've lived in a couple of places in Latin America, and definitely the neighborhood I'm staying in, Bogotá, right now, as here visiting, fantastic food for sure. Definitely a wide range of fun places to choose. And I'm going to have to get in on one of those coffee tours, coffee visits, like you said. I love that too. And so along those lines, the kind of last question here, any favorite tourism recommendations that you would give to, the U.S. engineering team who's coming here to work with their Colombian counterparts? Where should they take them? Where should they go?
I think number one is just don't do what the tourists do. You can go to Monserrate, you can go to Andres, which is a famous restaurant here. But the local cuisine here is just fantastic. It's actually in Chapinero, which is the cool chic neighborhood here. There's a restaurant called El Chato that Times Magazine put in the top 50 best restaurants in the world. And again, this is chefs that have gone outside, come back to Colombia, seen that there's kind of a new rise in different types of clients, and they're mixing local Colombian food with French cuisine. So it's amazing. Number two is just get active. The hiking is amazing. You can see maybe from the background to offices, you can go, it's a beautiful hike, see the amazing views of the city. And then number 3 is obviously you just got to get to the Caribbean. The beaches are fantastic, the food's fantastic. And I think one of our, famous authors, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Nobel Prize winner, it's a wonderful quote. It's not going to sound as good in English, but it's like, I can go to the Caribbean, Barbados, whatever. You come out of the plane, it's nice. There's something about the Colombian Caribbean, which is its authenticity, its noise, the smell of the food, the costeños, even though the coast, they're very loud, but they're amazing personalities. So it's extremely unique. And the best hotel chains are there. You've got Sofitel, you've got Marriott. But I think if you want to, if you're an engineering team and if you're coming by yourself or with your family, it's a great family place as well. Get to the Caribbean.
I'm sold. That sounds great. I'm looking forward to experiencing that myself. Well, Pablo, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about the software development and tech market here in Colombia. Really enjoyed it speaking with you. And is there any other anything else you want to share with our viewers about remoti, or where can they find more information?
Yeah, so obviously in all our socials, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, but really I think one of the things remoti does very well is we de-risk coming here. A lot of people want to start here. A lot of people want to get a taste for it. You don't need to go so big straight away. Start with a small team, understand how they integrate with your team. You don't need to hire a local recruiter. You don't have to hire a local lawyer. You don't have to manage the payroll. You need to find these folks. It's really people infrastructure that we can turn around in a couple of weeks. And with one client, we went from 0 to 100 in less than 7 months, mid to senior engineers. So we can move quickly, and even though it's a great business model, I'm extremely proud that socially this year we've provided 700 jobs to Colombia.
Fantastic.
And we're just getting started. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you get to really help build out that Colombian dream, which is fantastic.
And I think it's a simple thing that one person's spending is another person's income. And as crass as it sounds, if we're able to bring more jobs, put money into people's hands, it's just simply going to help the economy. And I've got an unusual background that I'm extremely English. My English grandfather taught at Cambridge University. My Colombian grandfather was an electrical engineer in the coffee region here. Part of my mission and what gets me out of bed is I simply want to just introduce people to this wonderful country. But most importantly, it's like we can help US companies turn around with efficiency, with people. And that's what gets out of bed every morning.
Yeah. So good for the US companies, good for the Colombian economy and the developers here as well. So yeah, definitely win-win. Again, thank you, Pablo, very much. Appreciate your time and for sharing with us. And for those of you watching this video, this is the complete interview with Pablo Miller from Remoti, which we'll have up on the Scaling Tech Podcast YouTube channel. And then excerpts from this will also be used in an episode coming up of the Scaling Tech Podcast. So to make sure that you don't miss that, check us out at scalingtechpod.com and follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. So thanks for joining me. And thank you again, Pablo.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.